Near Bainbridge town in the county down, one morning last July, down a Borean green came a sweet colleen, and she smiled as she passed me by. She looked so sweet from her two bare feet to the sheen of her nut-brown hair. Such a coaxing elf, so I shook myself to make sure I was really there. From Bantry Bay up to Derrick Way, and from Galway to Dublin town, no maid I've seen like the sweet Colleen that I met in the county down. As she onwards sped, sure I shook my head, and I looked with a feeling rare. Then I says I, to a passer-by, who's the maid with the nut-brown hair? He smiled at me, and with pride says he, that's the jewel of old Ireland's crown. She's young Rosie McCann, from the banks of the Banks, is the star of the county down. From Bantry Bay up to Derry Quay, and from Galway to Dublin town. No maid I've seen like the sweet Colleen that I met in the county down. Well, I've travelled a bit, and ne'er was hit since my roving career began. Then fair and square I surrendered there to the charms of the Rosie McCann. I'd a heart to let, and no tenant yet did I see in shawl or gown. But in she went, and I asked no rent from the star of the county down. From Bantry Bay up to Derry Quay, and from Galway to Dublin town, no maid I've seen like the sweet Colleen that I met in the county down. At the harvest fair I'll be surely there, and I'll dress in my Sunday clothes, with my shoes shone bright and my hat cocked right, from a smile from my nut-brown rose. No pipe I'll smoke, and no horse I'll yoke, though with rust my plough turns brown, till a smiling bride by my own fireside sits the star of the county down. From Bantry Bay up to Derry Quay, and from Galway to Dublin town, no maid I've seen like the sweet Colleen that I met in the county down. You know, your bowels are the lowest part of you. Your highest part? Obviously, your pancreas. That's why keto is king, friends. For real though, a lot of Americans do be suffering from adrenal fatigue. That's for sure. And because we drink too much coffee, it's that simple. Too much coffee, too much sugar, blood sugar, you know. Coffee forces your blood sugar into your muscles, like forces it, even though your system itself isn't triggering it. That's why you feel energetic despite the fact that you don't have to sweat at all in order to get there with coffee. I mean, I'd be lying if I say it wasn't a good way to start working, right? Because it's like you're already in the it's like the seamless transition. But then every time you use a tool, you get what you could get with your own willpower. Your willpower gets that much smaller and weaker. So you got to keep that in mind. Everybody's doing good. Just gotta put that out there. There's not a punishment worse than what the idea guys deserve for screwing with Christian. You mess with the focal point of all of our collective suffering. I'ma seal you inside of 2 canoes and throw some honey and meat inside of it and glue them together and push you out into the swamp, you piece of garbage. Enjoy scaphism, stalker. For real, that was really messed up what the idea guys did to Chris. You know, Tim Dillon is wild because he's basically like if Ethan Ralph had deep empathy and profound bravery, and that's it. That's really all it really needs to separate the two, right? And it's crazy. You see Sean Ryan, and you see Tim Dillon, and you see Ethan Ralph, and you go, I can tell all of you are Scotch-Irish. I can tell. First off, I can tell you all have slight Irishness from their button noses. But secondly, I can tell you're all Scotch Irish because you all have that same exact, like small eyes, big head, square, slightly weak but solid jaw look about you. Tim Dillon's very, very funny, though. He's a very funny guy. He's almost a little bit too funny, you know what I'm saying? I think the funniest people are people that kind of like lay back for most of the time, and then they just like it. It's like the punctuation marks between the silence that actually makes the music, right? It's like, dun, dun, dun. Otherwise, just a constant noise, and that's not music. So I think that's the big thing that I can levy as a criticism against Tim Dillon is like his funny guy shtick is like a constant noise, and what he needs to do, which is and like I think Null is almost like too far on the other end of the spectrum for this. He needs to bridge the gap, right? We got the Tim Dillon, Josh Moon spectrum, right? And you need to be right here in the middle. In fact, I actually think Ethan Ralph, surprisingly, actually gets that really right. I wasn't just joking. Now, I was partially joking, but I wasn't just joking when I said that Ethan Ralph is more successful than a lot of people that hate him. He's actually really good at entertaining people. Like, genuinely, like, how many of us have Ralphism stuck in our head because of how good he is with entertaining people, even at his own expense? So, in the spectrum of Tim Dillon to Josh Moon, he should be more of an Ethan Ralph in my opinion when it comes to comedy. I think both Sam Hyde and Nick Rochefort do really good. Nick Rochefort is more balanced than Sam Hyde. Sam Hyde actually ends up getting a little bit more into the stand-up comedian spectrum of like too much noise, too much movement, trying too hard, not enough emphasis on timing, and trying to appeal to this lowest common denominator dopamine fiend that does have a lot of money, but is like throwing peanuts at the elephants at the zoo core style of easily bored. So, I don't know. Maybe just something that I'm thinking about. I don't know if you'll ever need that advice. Falconeering and all its Saudi adherents are pretty silly. It's pretty silly because the implication is that the falcon will have no better place to land than your arm. The falconer's duty is to destroy all the trees in arm's length. I've been thinking about this a lot. I've been thinking about a lot of stuff recently, a lot. But one of the things is like the history of humanity. I suspect that people were civilized, living in civilization in Egypt for about 100,000 years. And then eventually it kind of like contracted around the Nile. But like the entire swath of Egypt and northern Sudan, I think people were living there for about, 100,000 years. I think people were living there for about 100,000 years. And I think about halfway through the occupation, the overall length of the occupation of Egypt, people started to move into, at the time, a very green and full of extremely vicious natural predators, Saudi Arabia and Middle East. Like the bull and the cow come from Syria. So you see the bull's big horns and harsh attitude. That likely comes from the fact there used to be tigers all throughout the Middle East, all over the place. The tiger, lions all over the Middle East, especially around Egypt and the middle Saudi region, the northern Saudi region. It was very, very rough for people to break out of North Africa, I think. Personally, I'm just guessing. And then it was pretty smooth to transition from the tools that society had living in the Middle East to India. And I think that happened over the course of the next 20,000 years, in between around 50,000 BC and 30,000 BC. And then from 30,000 BC, people lived in India. And from 30,000 BC to 15 to 10,000 BC, India actually became the center of the world. Like, legitimately, I'm not joking about that. It makes perfect sense why Indo-Europeans and like all their technology and all their strength and all their capability erupted like an alien chest burster out of India and went up into Eurasia and then became the Europeans, our ancestors. India was the center of the world. India's 30,000 years ago. That's where the wheel was invented. Then, 20,000 years ago, 15,000 years ago, China started really taking off. And 20,000 years ago, people started to occupy the Eurasian steppe with a more shamanistic culture. I think they may have brought a lot of their polytheistic, Hinduistic beliefs from India into the steppe and then combined them with an animist nature worship of the Uralic peoples and the Ugric peoples that already lived there, to form a shamanistic, yeah, it's very possible that there were like legitimately like partially Neanderthal populations that actually lived there. When I say people with civilizations, I'm talking specifically Homo sapiens, right? So, and as people moved throughout the Neanderthal lands, the reason why you see, white people that tend to have the biggest muscles and black people tend to be much skinnier is because, and especially when it comes to the shoulders, like I can't make my shoulders small. It's literally impossible for me to ever have my shoulders small. My shoulders have always been big. And come to find out, on my dad's side, we have more Neanderthal than the average person. So yeah, like that's the whole thing. I've been thinking about this a lot recently. Now, what was my point? Where did I go? Oh yeah, falconeering. So the green, that used to be a place where falcons flew around, had a great time, wonderful time. And if you want to look at the future of humanity, just look at the falcon. That's all you need to do. That'll show you right there what some people's plans, what the early attainers of cultural wealth and value, what their plans, unless they're in Christendom, because that has much, much deeper and much, much more altruistic plans, what the plans for humanity is under people like Saudi sheiks. You can tie to somebody's wrist. And you know what? The biggest number one, when it comes to numbers, slave traders are the Arabs. Second is the Portuguese, and the third is Jewish. But the slave trade, the Jewish slave trade, is like a much bigger ratio, so that you have a much smaller amount of Jewish slave traders as opposed to Portuguese or Arab. Like, small amount of Jewish slave traders, ton of slave product, right? So they almost, they were getting close to the output of the Portuguese with just a few hands being circulating slaves. I think it's important not to get caught up in nihilism of the will. That's depression. That's death. If I hear one more intelligent person say something like, well, why would I ever learn Spanish? I don't know. Because you can! You certainly can if you've already given up before you started to recognize how much you already know from shared etymology and intuition. Why not learn 14 languages like my great-grandfather did? Spanish is super easy too. It's literally unnecessarily phonetic. It's unnecessarily simple in many cases, unless you start getting into those pigeons, like Filipino and stuff like that. That's, you get a little bit more complicated there, but Spanish proper Spanish is unnecessarily phonetic. In fact, it has one of the most accurate definitions of a phonetic language from a phonetic people that you could possibly find. Like, I think Hebrew isn't very phonetic, honestly. Especially, like, you get some of those Southern Hebrew names from the ancient times. They're not phonetic at all. Egypt is a very unphonetic language. So, I don't know. Spanish is very easy, though. It's... There's so many different dialects that you won't end up getting berated like you would mispronouncing High German, of which there was only one dialect, and it's only existed for about 250 years. Huh? Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, if you don't want to learn Spanish, go ahead and learn German. If you want to be like racist about it or something, go learn German. Have fun. Have fun sticking 4 times as much like volume into your head to learn the exact same words. Slavs are great traditionalists, but their nomenclature leaves a lot to be desired. Slovenia, Slavonia, Slovakia, they're all 3 different places. Oh my gosh, guys, come on. Or you could pretend to cook a steak on a rock while standing waist deep in water. Either way. Which way, Western man? I think it would be very useful to learn another language. French? Hmm? Uh-huh. Ah, how about garlic? Speak some Irish to some good lads, eh? Or you could try learning some Scottish. That's a real difficult language right there. It really is very difficult. Is the accent is like you really got to be strangling your tongue. There are so many sweet songs our mothers sang to our infant ancestors, like how a wall remembers echoes until it is reduced back to dust. So too do our genes remember. Glory and the beauty of our people. A lot of normal men would behoove themselves to ask, am I going to let a crackhead be stronger than me? Or am I going to let a schizo be smarter than me? The key is willpower. That's the key. Because crackheads, they need their crack. They have no shortage of willpower. Schizos, they're not really quite sure always, because there are so many things that are valuable, truly, of attention, that they're not exactly sure where to address first, and where to address next, and where to address last. It's a big thing that makes a schizo aberrant or malignant, is the fact that they know all these things, they see all these things in front of them. They can't put a hierarchical, they can't make a tier list, they can't make a system by which they process things one at a time. They have to process everything everywhere all at once, right? Don't take the whole charcuterie board and shove it in your face, you know? By hook or by crook, you gotta care. Americans are so locked in the pendulum swinging motions of abundance to austerity, to abundance to austerity. It swings back and forth in this manner over and over and over again. Personified succinctly in the filet mignon first week of the paycheck, followed by ice soup second week of paycheck. It's not a meme. A lot of people live that way. This motion has become so drastic that I personally believe it's the pivotal mechanism that induces the pendulum swinging motion in our politics and our emotions. Everybody's bipolar in America, because America is a bipolar project, bipolar entity from which we swing back and forth between virtue signaling and conquest. Not creation, not construction, conquest. Then, you know, and that's why everybody hates us, is because then we go through a cycle of, oh, we're so sorry, and then we don't actually make things better. And that's exactly why we're the global hegemon of military. And let's see, I'm gonna get into that today. I will get into we're gonna get into that today. Yeah, we're gonna get into that today. So just hang tight, and we're gonna talk a little bit more about American military hegemony and how it slots into a bigger picture. You know who I hate? People who made GTA 5 their whole personality in a decade, who now go about not having GTA 6 their entire personality. Shut up about GTA 6. Shut up. I don't care. Nobody should care that a game hasn't been released yet. Nobody should care. Elder Scrolls 6, GTA 6, who cares? For all you know, the fact that it's the number 6 could have some weird, goofy, Freemasonic crap involved where they drop, they drop Elder Scrolls 6, they drop GTA 6, and then they find another, Kingsfield 6, I don't know, Dark Souls 6, I don't know, man. They could do some weird crap with that just because of its weird gematria number, and your games and your entertainment is so obviously just a plaything now for them. They're not the clowns anymore. You are. So shut up about GTA 6, clown. If you like a girl, wake up at 4 a.m. and hand make her a quiche and bring it to her for breakfast. It really, really works. Maybe don't put peas in it. It worked in my case, specifically because I knew the girl really liked peas. Maybe don't put peas in your quiche. That looks very weird. Although, to be perfectly honest, peas are really good at not losing their form with heat. So actually, you know, it ends up kind of looking like green pearls strewn throughout it. But I wouldn't suggest it. It's a very risky play. Worked for me, but it's a subjective thing. You got to find out what your girl likes. You got to make sure things are nice and fluffy and creamy and not too spicy, but spiced right? So, you know, let the egg do a lot of walking, but recognize that you always need a touch of garlic, a touch of cayenne, a touch of this, that, and the other. If you want, put a little bit of turmeric in it, you'll make the yellow more yellow. You'll make the egg yellower and more fluffy and, well, not fluffy, but good presenting. So, yeah, try that. The state's doing bad things, but the people that it's being done to deserve it. Truly the catchphrase of modernity, is it not? How long can we go back and find this exact viewpoint when it comes to, oh, I don't know, Napoleon's oubliettes, where Napoleon would just throw people into prisons and completely forget about them and lose the paperwork involved in them, so that these enemies of the state would be just depersoned, and that's it. You know? How far do you want to go back? How far do you want to go back? Because we could go back quite some time. Go back to the brass bull days, for instance. I think the way the movie American Psycho portrays physical personification of American finance in the 80s and 90s is genuinely so genius. It's so genius what they do. It's so genius. You have this preening, pampered, pretentious man, not a pussy, but indeed a pushover, who is physically perfect. Not a blemish on his skin. Elaborate hygiene rituals and rudimentary health routines. I actually think this is a perfect encapsulation of Reaganite America. The America built by an actor aggrieved at his environment and peers. The sort of man that after receiving a shaving nick would feel fully justified in stabbing a homeless man to death behind a dumpster, because that's what happens in the book. Because we are perfect, and they are not. There must be appropriate force leveraged against this slight for the universe to become balanced again. Oh, Cain, you fool. Oh, Cain. Oh, Cain. Your spirit cries out in pain as your brother's cries out in confusion. Oh, Cain. This is the mindset of America before 9/11, to a T. This is the twangy country songs about sticking a boot up some towelhead's ass to the more swarthy American. This is the sort of behavior that scared the American zeitgeist over the years. It was indulged to vote for a disruption of it in Obama, of which he took the worst and elevated, and the best intentions he dashed against the rocks. A lot of modern autism can be traced back to that old post-Reagan Clarity California adage, I'm letting go of all earthly attachments. Besides the things I like and desire, I'm just like the Buddha. So, now we're going to get into this. Here's some fun facts. The obelisk at the Capitol that they call the Washington Monument is actually a consecratory marker erected by the Freemasons that pledges our country to the concept of military hegemony. Hegemony is world domination, by the way, if you don't know. There are 3 of these obelisks around the world that are of note, although 18 of them in total that we know of. There's one in Washington. There's a pair that resides in both London and New York called Cleopatra's Needles. They represent economic hegemony from London and New York finance. And there's one of many in Vatican City that represents religion. It's the tallest one. I can understand how people assume it takes might to make mistakes into miracles. But without the grace of God, strength would not be possible. Here's the thing. Try and grow a plant from seed. Try it. It's a lot harder than it seems. Want to know why? You have to nurture this plant as if you have to provide this for this plant the sort of protection that its parent plant would have provided looming over the ground in which it's spawning. And a lot of these plants, it takes over the ground after its more perennial parent plant has passed on. And what this shows us is you can't just throw seed in the ground and get food. You have to respect the process the food came from, which is a lot of the case. You have a huge environment with hundreds of different things. You have tall trees that don't provide you any fruit. But what those tall trees do in many cases is provide the proper rhizome in the ground, provide the proper ground biome, and provide the amount of moisture necessary to grow these things. And if you just go out into a field and you clear cut the forest and you put plots in, you could get failure after failure after failure. Lots of people discovered this the hard way and died and were responsible for a massive amount of death because of this. It's that simple. And that's the thing that people weren't taught. The fact that, no, you as a human being are so reliant on natural processes, you couldn't even begin to understand it if you tried. And that's trying. And so you make these little plants, these baby plants, you start you make a greenhouse as a person. You make little containers where the water can be, circulated properly or drip fed if necessary. And then you allow these things to grow from seed, from sprout, from baby. And it is successful. But if you just throw a seed or a sproutling into the ground, you'll get nothing because it will die. It'll get crushed by the rain. It will wither and die from the sun. It needs the protection of its parent plant, and you got to think about all of life this way. It's just like, this is not as simple as you think. In fact, like 80% of PhDs are achieved by writing a paper that says, well, man, actually, I think it depends. So anyways, that's just definitely something to think about, something to dwell on, something to meditate on for sure. Like, realistically, if you work out as much as you can, you turn into a celery man, gaunt, taut, small. But giving your body time to regrow, giving it grace, is what you need to actually grow muscles. You find this out when you start doing research into weightlifting and you read the Gym Bible or you listen to Arnold Schwarzenegger. You need that time. After you hit your protein window, 30 minutes after your high-intensity exercise, you need to give your body time to, regrow. Okay? It isn't all about just putting as much effort in as quickly as possible. It's how you do it. And when you find that out, you can ration so much time and so much energy. And in so doing, you can ration money. So here's good advice. Don't spend. Don't worry about your credit score. Don't put your money in the bank. Convert it all into change. Convert it all into nickels. Stack it in the corner of your home. Good luck stealing that, buddy. You can't buy a shovel anymore because the global economy collapsed. Melt the nickels down into a shovel head. Boom. There goes the dynamite. The only thing you realistically have to worry about is herbicide proliferation and artificial solar dimming, which is a project that Bill Gates is quite interested in. And you never really know if a lot of these explosions are accidental or necessary, because a lot of the aluminum oxide proliferation in the atmosphere from SpaceX products, whether it's Starlink or Starship, actually will cause the same exact thing that Bill Gates wants to have happen, which, surprisingly, actually, The Simpsons blew the whistle on with Mr. Burns. Now, I don't watch The Simpsons, but I do remember people talking about how The Simpsons director, Matt Groening, put Mr. Burns as a personification of Bill Gates when Bill Gates came out with a project of he wanted to dim the sun, which naturally would prevent people from, working outside of, you work for dollar system. The dollar system provides you food from the factory-owned farms, factory-farmed, corporate-owned farms. And then That's that. You can't grow your food on your own. You know, all your food is grown with hazmats and you're chronically ill and you die at the age of 45, which is like, you know, we always say our ancestors are so stupid. If there was a problem, you know, there was somebody somewhere in the village that had a big book that he would write down, chew on this root, it will solve this problem. You know, our ancestors were not stupid. The concept of doctors, the concept of hospitals, it's been around for a long time. It's heavily personified in the Catholic faith, but it has been around for a long time. That's what Druids were. They're the village doctor as well as the village, you know, chief who determined whether they should migrate or what crops they should grow and when the weather would be, because you could actually tell weather patterns based on, like, you know, wisdom passed down. So, oh God, I hate it when people say our ancestors were stupid. We have bones that prove that people were living till in their 60s, 10,000 years ago, because they had people to care for them, you know, and stupid, man. I really, really just dislike the whole ancestor hatred, the saying we all died in 30s, women always died in childbirth. That's why they had a whole bunch of kids. Not because they loved their kids, not because their kids were the most important thing in the world, and they still are. And all this artificial light and sound and instant gratification and injectable pleasure that we put over having kids still doesn't change the fact that people who have kids are the happiest people. Okay? So... oh, and don't listen to Nick Fuentes. That guy's lying out of his teeth. He is a homosexual man. He does not want to have kids. He doesn't care about women's reproductivity. He just wants to hurt them. He's a federal asset. And the left will never care about him other than to make fun of him. The right will never care about him other than to make fun of him. The only people that will care about him are literal third world pedophiles. That's the only people that will ever care about Nick Fuentes and his America First movement. Okay? Okay. Cheers.